Platypus versus Monkey is basically a story about a sort of 1940s hard-boiled detective hero that also happens to be a anthropomorphic platypus who packs a 45 and smokes cigarettes and is kind of a rough and tumble. Has brass knuckles, yes, which you get to see him wield effectively in the story. And it's basically about him dealing with a past loss and basically sort of thinking about his life and what's going on and a love that he's lost. And all of a sudden there's a crash in the city and something a little different happens.
Yeah, the monkey from the past, I guess, was it Soviet Russia time? This monkey comes down and he's been mutated by some aliens, or I guess given some augmentation, and so he comes down and starts wreaking some havoc.
You get kind of that time period of the 1940s where the United States and the Soviet Union were in a kind of Cold War.
But it's present time in the story. Yes. He's stuck in the past time. So
exactly. So they're both kind of caught back in that time period, and it's kind of relevant for today because over there in the former Soviet Union, there's folks who would like to go back to that way of government, and there's folks here who want to go back to the Cold War mentality.
One thing that was really an honor to do with the story is because the first time I met you and you guys had the books, I knew that the platypus was on the cover, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I liked him. He had his suit. He was all stylish. And when you said you guys hadn't done a story for him yet, and then you said, hey, you can do this story. I'm like, oh, I'm like, those are the main guys. So sure, I wanted to do it, and I had seen that they had kind of gone through a couple design changes. So I knew that this time you guys were trying to do a little bit of something, another change, but I wanted to make sure that I kept to what I had already known about them too. So I wanted to make sure that this time we'd make some really, I guess solid designs that we could say, okay, even if you do some more changes to them in the future, this is who they are and this is what they do. So
some of the design elements that you brought to the characters, especially the monkey, your illustrations of the monkey in the story have really sort of defined what that character is all about, with his crazy facial expressions and his biomechanical hand that has 4 fingers and his other hand that still has 5. A little trivia, when you're reading the story, if you check it out, we actually had a 3D animator model the monkey, and he put 5 fingers.
It was a good drawing. It was a very good drawing.
It was great, but he made both hands have 5 fingers, and I was like, I didn't even notice it, but I sent the design to Brian, and he's like, well, actually, the monkey only has 4 fingers on that biomechanical hand. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even notice that. So, but it's little things like that that really make it special, and that really add depth to the storyline, because there's a lot of history in this story. There's a lot of quotes from Soviet leaders in the past, because part of what you learn about Monkey is he's had all of that propaganda implanted in his brain. So whenever he hears a certain word, he'll just kind of key off that word and spout out some Joseph Stalin quote or Nikita Khrushchev or something like that. And so it's a lot of fun, and it's very funny, but it's also kind of like, whoa, did he really say that?
Yeah. And I guess dealing with those different design elements and the bits of the story, I guess the process it went through was, Mark, you had the story first, and you sent that to me, and then we kind of went through the character designs. And then from that, and I guess it's kind of my fault because on the sheet, Monkey's hand was on the side, so I guess if people look back at it, they didn't know he had 5 fingers on the hand. But anyway, so we did the designs. We went through a few different ones for the girl because we were trying to figure her out. And I guess the script went through a few drafts too, right?
It did, yeah.
But yeah, at a point, we were just kind of figuring things out, and when it finally got to the pages, it's weird because when you're a comic artist, sometimes you have to be a writer in a way too, because we were working on the script live, kind of as the pages were being developed. Maybe that was part of the scheduling, but there were points where we'd have to say, okay, is that going to work in the panel? Does that have to be 2 panels? Is that detail going to flow with the story? We were making decisions like that. So, I mean, as that process went through, I was doing these thumbnail sketches which were, I guess, about this big on a sheet of paper, and that was the full page proportionally. And then for my process, I guess I took those, once you guys were happy with those, and then took them to the big paper, which we talked about earlier. And then I went through that penciling process to get them finished.
You know, and that was one thing that was really interesting about basically your approach is your thumbnails. Well, you know, first you had sort of the stick figure thumbnails, and then you have a second stage of thumbnails, and where that second stage of thumbnails is better than a lot of people's pencils that I've seen. And then you go to a third stage of doing the finished pencils.
Yeah, I mean, I had done some other book projects and stuff, and I guess what I learned when I was in art school was, you know, when you got a good sketch, you should stick with it in some way. Like, don't throw it out the window. So I've seen that I like to work small sometimes first, and I can get some nice lines that way. And if there's something I really don't like, yeah, I'll change it whenever I can. But if I like it, then I'm like, okay, when I blow it up, I can play with this a little bit more, I can play with this line a little more, or I can just kind of stick with what that face is, or I can just stick with that building and just keep rolling with it, you know, just use what you are building yourself off of. So.
Well, the thing I liked about working with you is how collaborative you are. You know, a lot of like, and I'm collaborative too, and this whole story was a collaboration. A lot of guys and girls in Terminus were involved, but you know, when we were working on things, there's two female characters in the story. There's Gina, who is Platypus's old lady love, who we don't really know anything about other than that he lost her. We don't know if she's dead or, you know, where she's gone to, but there's also a character, Joe, in the story. So it's just about, you know, defining who those women are and giving them a specific look so that Joe is distinct from Gina. And so it was interesting just kind of hashing that out, because I think when the script was originally written,
Gina was more like Joe.
Yeah.
And, well, actually, wait, it was Gina, then Joe, then Gina, and Gina was like Joe, then Joe.
Confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very confusing. So part of the creative process was just defining who's who and who goes where and what things are.
For people who are interested in becoming illustrators for comic books, or I guess working on their own books even, keep practicing. That's the #1 thing. I think you've probably heard that from everybody at some point in time. Always practice. #2 thing I'd say is study from life. That's like very important. People, when they have proportion issues, perspective issues, all that stuff is all around you. So you draw a person enough times, you draw your mom enough times, you draw the people walking around in front of your, you know, house, your store enough times, you're gonna figure out how to draw a person. So, and at that point, when you figure out how you can draw things that exist, then you can start to play on them. You know, if you have inspirations from your favorite cartoons or something, you know, pull all your inspirations together. And that's how you begin to make your own style, is that you're really pulling from what you like, and your style reflects you. You know, it's what you like to do. So at that point, if you still want to do comics, you know, hopefully, I guess you're reading them. I read them sometimes. I don't always get my hands on comics, but I love comics. So that's what always drew me to them. I like telling stories. So when you enjoy that kind of thing, you know, just get your mind into it. Just really want to know more about it, and just do it. You know, you can only really learn about telling a story by telling a story. Then you can take stories from other people and you can see, okay, this is how we want to handle this part, or I can see this part. You know, your visions become clearer when you're interpreting other people's scripts too. So be flexible, you know, and also, you know, keep your mind open to different subject matters. Yeah, maybe you really like superhero stories, but maybe there's a little bit of superhero around you, you know, like what's superhero about, I don't know, going to a shopping mall. If you can like take normal situations and see them in a way that you like those too, it'll help open your doors up to being able to do a larger variety of stories, and in your own way too. So just be sure to keep your mind open and always just keep practicing going to that next cool thing. So I guess that's my advice.
Cool. Well, thanks for working on the platypus monkey story, man. It was
No
awesome.
problem. Hopefully we'll get to do another one.
Heck yeah, let's do some more, man.
Yeah.
Good stuff.